Let's start with what you've been told. Atlantis, the mystical island, advanced beyond comprehension, powered by crystals, protected by magic, lost beneath the waves as punishment from the gods. Beautiful story, marketable story, completely fabricated story. Here's what actually happened. In 360 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, not fantasy novels, not mythology, dialogues, philosophical texts meant to teach lessons about governance and hubris. And buried inside these texts is something extraordinary, exact measurements. Plato describes the width of walls, the depth of canals, the diameter of rings, the height of temples. He gives distances in stadia, the ancient Greek unit of measurement, roughly 185 meters. No other myth does this. Zeus doesn't live in a palace that's 47 stadia wide. Thor's hammer isn't forged from exactly 200 kilograms of Uru metal. But Atlantis, Plato gives you the construction manual. And that's the problem Hollywood doesn't want you to think about. Because the moment you treat Atlantis like an engineering project instead of a magical kingdom, you realize something terrifying. This could have been built not by aliens, not by wizards, by humans, with Bronze Age technology, with enough slave labor, with enough arrogance. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take Plato's numbers, every single one, and we're going to reverse engineer the real Atlantis, the fortress, the machine, the monument to human pride that drowned in its own ambition. And we start with the blueprints. Sirius opened the Critias dialogue, section 113. Plato writes, the island on which the royal palace stood had a diameter of 5 stadia. This they surrounded with circular walls of stone and covered the bridges and made a passage into and out of the royal palace. 5 stadia, that's 925 meters, nearly a full kilometer. He continues, the zone of water nearest to the citadel was 3 stadia in width. The next zone of land was equal in width. Of the 2 zones of water, one was 2 stadia wide, the other 3. Stop right there. Do you hear what he's doing? He's not describing a city. He's describing a defensive system, a series of concentric rings, alternating water and land, designed to make naval invasion nearly impossible. This isn't poetry, this is military architecture. Let me put the full structure in perspective. Ring 1, the center, the citadel island, 5 stadia wide, the command center. Ring 2, a water channel, 3 stadia wide, the first moat. Ring 3, a land ring, 3 stadia wide, the first defensive wall. Ring 4, another water channel, 2 stadia wide, the second moat. Ring 5, another land ring, 2 stadia wide, the second defensive wall. Ring 6, the outer water channel, 3 stadia wide, the third moat. Ring 7, the outer land ring, connected to the main island, total diameter, 27 stadia, just over 5 kilometers across. For context, that's larger than the city of Venice, larger than ancient Rome at its height. And here's the genius part. The rings aren't just decorative, they're layered kill zones. Any invading navy would have to cross the outer water ring, exposed to archers on the outer land ring, breach or bypass the outer land wall under fire from the second water ring's patrol boats, cross the second water ring, now taking fire from 2 directions, scale the second land wall while defenders rain projectiles from the citadel itself. It's a gauntlet, a wet castle, a fortress designed by someone who understood siege warfare. But how did people actually live here? How did they move between the rings? Plato thought of that too. He describes bridges, covered bridges that connected each ring to the next. And beneath these bridges, tunnels, submerged passages large enough for triremes, Greek warships to pass through. Let me repeat that. Warships could sail underneath the city. The Atlanteans didn't just build a city, they built a naval base with residential sectors, a fortress with farms, a citadel with supply lines, and every single measurement Plato gives is structurally sound. In 2019, a team of engineers ran simulations using Plato's numbers. Their conclusion, the described dimensions are consistent with Bronze Age hydraulic engineering principles. Construction would have been labor-intensive, but entirely feasible. So the question isn't, could Atlantis have been built? The question is, why did they build it this way? And the answer is in the stone. Let's talk about the defensive brilliance of this design. The ring system wasn't just about keeping enemies out. It was about controlling movement, creating choke points and psychological domination. Think about the logistics. To reach the citadel at the center, you had 3 options: cross the bridges, navigate the tunnels, or attempt an amphibious assault. Option 1, the bridges. Plato describes them as covered structures. Why covered? Because it turns each bridge into a kill box, narrow passage, roof overhead, defenders on both sides. If you're attacking, you're funneled into a corridor where arrows and spears rain down from murder holes above. Option 2, the tunnels. These weren't sewers, these were navigable channels wide enough for warships. But here's the catch. The Atlanteans controlled the gates. Iron portcullises at each entrance. One wrong move, one political miscalculation, and your entire fleet is trapped underwater. Option 3, amphibious assault. You try to scale the walls directly from the water. But remember, these aren't stone beaches. These are engineered moats. The walls rise straight up from deep water. No footholds, no beach to land on. And while you're treading water in full armor, defenders are dropping rocks on your head. It's not a city, it's a machine designed to kill invaders efficiently. But the psychological effect was even more devastating. Imagine you're a Bronze Age commander. You've conquered coastal cities. You've breached fortified walls. You understand siege warfare. And then you see Atlantis for the first time. It doesn't look like anything you've ever encountered. There's no single wall to breach, no gate to ram, no weak point to exploit, just rings. Endless concentric rings of stone and water stretching toward a gleaming citadel you can see but can't reach. And the message is clear. This isn't a city that fears invasion. This is a city that expects it and is bored by the prospect. That's not defense. That's a statement of superiority. But the rings were only the skeleton. The real artistry, the real menace, was in the materials they used. And those materials reveal something darker about who these people really were. Plato writes, they quarried stone from beneath the center island and from beneath the outer and inner rings. There were stones of white, black, and red color. 3 colors, 3 types of stone, all from the same island. Now, to most readers, this sounds like decorative choice, aesthetic flair. But to a geologist, this is a volcanic profile. Let me explain. White stone, likely pumice or light-colored tuff, formed from explosive volcanic eruptions. Lightweight, easy to carve, used for decorative facades. Black stone, basalt, dense, heavy, formed from cooled lava flows, used for foundations and load-bearing walls. Red stone, oxidized volcanic rock, iron-rich, weathers to a rust-red color, used for accents and intimidation. You know where else you find this exact combination? Santorini, the Greek island that exploded in 1600 BC. The same island many historians believe inspired Plato's Atlantis story. But here's where it gets interesting. Plato says the Atlanteans didn't import these stones. They quarried them from beneath the city itself, which means they were literally hollowing out the island from the inside. Imagine the engineering. They dig shafts down into the volcanic bedrock. They extract massive blocks of stone. They leave behind a network of tunnels and chambers. And what do you get? A city that's simultaneously above ground and below ground. A fortress with basements, storage vaults, escape tunnels, maybe even geothermal heating from the volcanic vents. But there's a darker implication here. By hollowing out the island's foundation, they were destabilizing it. Every block removed was a weakness added. Every tunnel carved was a fracture waiting to spread. And when you combine that with the weight they were putting on top, temples, palaces, walls made from the densest stone known to the ancient world, you're not building a city, you're building a pressure cooker. Now let's talk about what it actually looked like. Plato describes the buildings as being decorated in this tricolor pattern: white marble facades, black basalt columns, red stone borders. But unlike Greek architecture, which was obsessed with pure white marble and symmetry, Atlantis looked organic, raw, almost volcanic in its aesthetic. Imagine walking through the city. The walls aren't smooth, they're rough-hewn. Veins of red iron oxide streak through the black basalt like dried blood. The white pumice reflects sunlight, making the entire structure shimmer in the heat. It doesn't look like Athens. It doesn't look like Egypt. It looks like the island itself grew the city, like the buildings erupted from the earth rather than being placed on it. And that's before we talk about the metal that covered everything. The metal that shouldn't exist. Mysterious Plato uses a word that has haunted archaeologists for 2,400 years, orichalcum. He writes they covered the wall of the citadel's outer ring with brass, the inner wall they coated with tin, and the wall of the Acropolis itself with orichalcum, which sparkled like fire. Orichalcum, in ancient Greek orichalcus, literally translates to mountain copper. But here's the problem, we don't know what it was. Mysterious, no confirmed samples have ever been found. No ancient foundry has revealed the recipe. The word appears in Plato's text and almost nowhere else. So what was it? Let me give you the three leading theories. Theory 1, high-grade brass. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc. When polished, it has a brilliant golden red color. In sunlight, it absolutely glows. In 2015, a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily was discovered carrying ingots of a copper-zinc alloy that matched Plato's description. The media called it proof of Atlantis. It wasn't, but it proved that ancient metallurgists could create alloys that fit the legend. Theory 2, aurichalcite, a natural mineral. There's a rare mineral called aurichalcite, a zinc-copper carbonate that forms naturally in oxidized ore deposits. It has a greenish gold sheen. Some scholars think aurichalc was just a Greek name for this mineral, prized for decoration. Theory 3, lost alloy technology. The most interesting theory. Aurichalcum was a proprietary alloy whose recipe was deliberately kept secret by Atlantean metallurgists and died with them. Bronze Age civilizations were obsessed with metallurgical secrecy. The Hittites guarded their ironworking techniques like nuclear codes. What if aurichalcum was the same? A strategic material, a symbol of technological superiority. Now here's why this matters. Plato says the inner walls of the citadel were covered in this metal, not decorated. Covered. Imagine the visual effect. You're a sailor approaching Atlantis for the first time. The outer walls are brass, gleaming yellow gold. The second walls are tin, bright silver white. And then you see the citadel. The entire inner ring is plated in aurichalcum. And as the sun rises behind it, the metal doesn't just reflect light. It looks like the city is on fire. That's psychological warfare. That's not defense, that's intimidation. You're not looking at a city, you're looking at a statement. We have resources you don't. We have knowledge you don't. We are not like you. And the Atlanteans made sure you saw that message from miles away. But the metal wasn't the most impressive part. The most impressive part was what they built with it. At the center of Atlantis, the core of the citadel island, stood two structures, the royal palace and the temple of Poseidon. Let me give you the scale Plato describes. The temple was a stadium in length, that's 105 meters, about 2 football fields. The width, half a stadium, 92 meters. The height, Plato doesn't specify, but he does say this: the roof was of ivory, adorned with gold, silver, and aurichalcum. The walls, pillars, and floors were lined with the same metals. Let's pause and do some math. If the temple's interior walls were covered in precious metals, even as thin sheets, we're talking about tons of gold, literal tons. A single gram of gold can be hammered into a sheet 1 square meter in size. So even a conservative estimate covering 10,000 square meters of wall space would require 10 kilograms of gold. But Plato says the roof was ivory adorned with gold. Elephant ivory, carved, inlaid with gold filigree. The wealth required to build this structure would bankrupt modern nations. But that's not the most disturbing part. Plato describes the centerpiece of the temple, a statue of Poseidon standing in a chariot, driving 6 winged horses. The statue was so tall it touched the ceiling. If the temple is 2 football fields long and the statue touches the roof, we're talking about a statue at least 30 meters tall. For reference, the Statue of Liberty, without the pedestal, is 46 meters. The Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio is 30 meters. The Atlanteans built a statue of their god that rivaled modern monuments, and Plato says it was made of gold. Not gold-plated, solid gold. Now, obviously, that's impossible. A solid gold statue that size would weigh over 500,000 kilograms. It would collapse under its own weight. So either Plato was exaggerating for dramatic effect, the statue was gold-plated wood or bronze, or, and this is the darkest option, the Atlanteans believed it was solid gold because their priests lied to them. Think about the implications of option 3. You're a citizen of Atlantis. You're told your city is blessed by Poseidon. The proof, a statue so massive, so golden, so perfect, it must be divine. You don't question it. You can't get close enough to check. The priests control access, and so you believe, you work, you build, you conquer, all in service of a lie wrapped in gold leaf. That's not religion. That's propaganda architecture. And it gets worse, because Plato describes what the Atlanteans did inside this temple. They sacrificed bulls. They poured the blood over the sacred inscriptions. They drank from golden cups and swore oaths in the darkness. Blood rituals. In a temple designed to inspire awe and terror, This wasn't worship. This was theatre, a performance of power designed to keep the population obedient and the military fanatical. And for a while it worked. Atlantis became the most powerful empire in the known world. They controlled trade routes, they crushed rivals, they expanded relentlessly, until the day the Earth decided to give its own review, and the review was apocalyptic.
Plato writes, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. One day, one night, for 2,400 years, people have read that as divine punishment. Zeus grew angry. Poseidon withdrew his protection. The gods smited the arrogant. But if we remove the mythology, what actually happened? Let me walk you through the physics of how a city like Atlantis actually collapses. Step 1, the earthquake. Atlantis was built on a volcanic island. We know this because of the tricolor stone, white pumice, black basalt, red oxidized rock. Volcanic islands sit on tectonic fault lines, and fault lines move. Imagine a magnitude 7 or 8 earthquake striking without warning. The ground doesn't just shake, it liquefies. This is called soil liquefaction. When seismic waves pass through water-saturated soil, the soil temporarily loses its strength and behaves like a liquid. Now remember, the Atlanteans hollowed out the island's core. They carved tunnels. They extracted massive stone blocks. The foundation was already compromised. When the earthquake hits, those tunnels collapse, the bedrock fractures, and the massive weight of the temples, palaces, and metal-clad walls, it all starts sinking. Step 2, the tsunami. An earthquake of that magnitude, especially one centered offshore, generates a tsunami, not the Hollywood wave that towers over skyscrapers. The real thing is worse. A tsunami in open water is only a meter or two high, but it's moving at 800 kilometers per hour, the speed of a jet. When it hits shallow water, it slows down, but it doesn't stop. The energy has to go somewhere, so it goes up. The wave compresses, rises, and slams into the coast with the force of a moving mountain. Plato's Atlantis, surrounded by water rings, would have been hit from every direction simultaneously. The outer ring floods first, water pours over the walls, the bridges collapse, the tunnels fill, and the people in the citadel, they're trapped. Step 3, the subsidence. Now combine the earthquake, the liquefaction, and the tsunami. The island's foundation is fractured, the tunnels are flooded, the weight of billions of kilograms of stone is pressing down on unstable, waterlogged soil, and then it drops, not slowly, not over years, in minutes. The Citadel Island, the core of Atlantis, sinks below sea level. The water rushes in to fill the void. The temples collapse inward. The golden statue of Poseidon topples into the abyss. And within 24 hours, there's nothing left but debris floating on the surface. Could this really happen? Yes, because it has happened. Santorini, 1600 BC, volcanic eruption, tsunami, entire Minoan cities buried. Port Royal, Jamaica, 1692, earthquake, liquefaction, 2/3 of the city sank into the harbor in minutes. Lisbon, 1755, earthquake, tsunami, fires, 85% of the city destroyed in one day. The physics are real, the precedents are documented. And if Atlantis existed, if it was built the way Plato described, it would have been perfectly designed to fail catastrophically. Heavy structures on hollow ground, metal-clad walls trapping heat and weight, no deep foundations, no earthquake engineering. They built a monument to their own arrogance, and the earth collected the debt. Plato says the Atlanteans believed they were blessed by the gods and immune to disaster. They weren't immune.
So let's answer the question everyone wants answered. Was Atlantis real? Here's what we know for certain. 1, Plato's numbers are structurally sound. Engineers have confirmed that the dimensions he described could have been built with Bronze Age technology. 2, the geological profile matches real locations. Santorini, the Azores, even parts of coastal Spain show volcanic tricolor stone deposits. 3, the collapse mechanism is proven. We have documented cases of cities sinking in 24 hours due to earthquakes and liquefaction. But here's what we don't have: physical evidence, no ruins, no artifacts, no orichalcum ingots with "Made in Atlantis" stamped on them. So what do I think? I think Plato did what every great teacher does. He took something real and turned it into a lesson. Maybe he heard stories of the Minoan civilization destroyed by the Santorini eruption. Maybe he learned about advanced Bronze Age cities like Tartessos in Spain that vanished from history. Maybe he witnessed Athens' own imperial overreach and wanted to warn future generations. And so he created Atlantis, not as a lie, as a parable, a story about what happens when a civilization becomes so advanced, so wealthy, so convinced of its own superiority that it stops seeing the cracks in its foundation. The Atlanteans didn't lose because they were evil. They lost because they were arrogant. They built their temples taller than their wisdom. They mined their own ground for profit and called it progress. They believed their technology made them invincible. And when the earth shook, they learned the truth. Nature doesn't negotiate. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Look around our world today. We build cities on fault lines and call it prime real estate. We hollow out mountains for resources and call it economic growth. We engineer marvels of technology and assume we've conquered risk. Sound familiar? Atlantis isn't a mystery. It's a mirror. And the question isn't whether it existed. The question is whether we're building it right now. I'm Alfonso. This is Myth Rebuilder. If you want to see me reconstruct the Tower of Babel and answer whether it was a monument to God or a weapon against him, subscribe now. Because the legends aren't dead. They're just waiting to be rebuilt.